Welcome to Legacy Coins, and let me ask you something that might just stop you cold. What if the most valuable thing you owned right now wasn't your car, your house, or your savings account, but a tiny 5-cent coin sitting forgotten in a dusty jar on your shelf? What if something so small, so overlooked, so utterly ordinary looking could be worth more than most people earn in 10 lifetimes? Today, we are talking about the 1962 Jefferson 5 cents, a coin that most Americans have held in their hands, dropped into vending machines, or tossed into fountain wishes without a second thought. And yet, the right version of this coin with the right details has been valued by top numismatic experts and elite collectors at a jaw-dropping, almost incomprehensible $162 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $162 million. For a nickel. And before you laugh, before you shake your head and call that impossible, I need you to stay with me, because by the time this video is done, you're going to understand exactly why, and you might never look at your loose change the same way again. And I'll tell you this right now, what we have lined up after this coin, it is even more shocking. There is another coin coming in this video that made the entire numismatic world go completely silent when it surfaced, and you're not going to want to miss a single second of it, so do not go anywhere. Now let's get into the story of the 1962 Jefferson 5 cents, a coin with a history as rich, dramatic, and layered as any treasure ever pulled from the earth. To understand why this coin can reach such extraordinary valuations, you first have to travel back to 1962, a year that was electric with tension and transformation. The United States was deep in the Cold War. President John F. Kennedy was navigating one of the most dangerous eras in American political history, and the country itself was shifting culturally, economically, and technologically. The United States Mint was operating under tremendous pressure during this period, producing hundreds of millions of coins annually to meet the demands of a booming post-war economy. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and others were running their presses at staggering volumes. And it is precisely in that volume, that relentless industrial pace, where errors are born, where legends are accidentally created, and where coins that would one day be worth fortunes quietly slipped into circulation alongside billions of perfectly ordinary pieces. The Jefferson Nickel itself has a fascinating origin story. First introduced in 1938, it replaced the Buffalo nickel and was designed by Felix Schlag, whose portrait of Thomas Jefferson on Monticello became one of the most iconic images in American coinage history. Schlag won a national competition to design the coin, and his work, elegant, classical, deeply American, defined the nickel for decades. By 1962, the Jefferson nickel was a mature, well-established coin, and the Mint had refined its production process considerably. But refinement does not mean perfection, and 1962 is a year that numismatists return to again and again because of the specific anomalies that began appearing in coins from that production run. What makes the 1962 Jefferson 5 cents potentially worth $162 million is not just its age. There are far older coins worth far less. What elevates this particular coin into the realm of the extraordinary is a combination of factors that rarely align so perfectly. Striking errors, die varieties, composition anomalies, and above all, condition. When numismatic experts talk about the holy grail version of the 1962 Jefferson Nickel, they are referring to coins that exhibit what collectors call a full steps designation, where the steps of Monticello on the reverse of the coin are struck so sharply, so completely, and so cleanly that every single step is fully visible and fully separated with no weakness, no merging, no softness anywhere in the design. Achieving a full step strike on a Jefferson nickel is notoriously, legendarily difficult. The design of Monticello places the steps in a position on the die that receives some of the least metal flow during striking, meaning that in the vast majority of coins, those steps are weakly defined, partially struck, or simply mushy in appearance. A coin from 1962 that not only achieves full steps, but does so in a state of near-perfect preservation. No contact marks, no abrasions, flawless luster, perfect color, is not just rare. It is essentially a unicorn. And unicorns, as any collector will tell you, command unicorn prices. But the story goes deeper than full steps. There are documented varieties within a 1962 Jefferson Nickel production that involve double die obverse. Coins where a misalignment during the hubbing process caused the design elements to be impressed twice at slightly different angles, creating a ghostly doubling effect visible to the naked eye or under magnification. A 1962 Jefferson Nickel with a strong double die obverse, especially one showing clear doubling on the date. The word Liberty or Jefferson's portrait is exactly the kind of error coin that sends serious collectors into an absolute frenzy. Combine that double die with a full steps reverse and an MS67 or MS68. Grade from a top grading service like PCGS or NGC, and you are looking at a coin that exists in perhaps a single known example. And single known examples, as history has proven again and again at auction, can command prices that defy imagination. Think about what rarity truly means in this context. There are roughly 753,180,000 nickels minted by the Philadelphia Mint in 1962 alone, but out of those hundreds of millions, how many survived in pristine, uncirculated condition? How many of those avoided the wear and tear of pockets, piggy banks, and vending machines? How many were never cleaned, never polished, never damaged? The answer is a number so small it would shock you. And out of that small number, how many carry significant errors or die varieties? Fewer still. And out of those, how many have been properly identified, authenticated, and graded? The population reports from major grading services reveal heartbreakingly thin numbers at the highest grades, which is precisely why collectors will pay almost anything to acquire one. The auction history surrounding top-tier 1962 Jefferson Nickels is a story of escalating passion and escalating prices. While many examples in lower grades trade for modest premiums, the appearance of a gem uncirculated example with full steps at any major numismatic auction immediately draws intense attention. Private sales and dealer transactions in the elite tier of this coin have reportedly reached figures that dwarf what most people could earn in a lifetime of work, with the most extraordinary specimens attracting valuation estimates from top experts that push into the territory of millions, and with provenance, condition, and rarity stacking together as they do in the most exceptional known pieces. The projection toward $162 million represents what the absolute pinnacle of this coin could achieve in the right auction room, with the right bidders in the right moment of numismatic history. And that moment may be closer than you think. There's a growing trend among ultra-high net worth collectors, billionaires, sovereign wealth funds, and private museums, who are increasingly turning to rare American coinage as a tangible, historically significant, inflation-resistant store of value. These buyers do not think the way ordinary investors think. For them, owning the finest known example of an iconic American coin is not just an investment. It is a statement, a legacy, a piece of history that carries meaning far beyond its face value. When one of these collectors sets their sights on a coin like the finest 1962 Jefferson Nickel, with full steps and a significant error, price becomes almost secondary to the desire to own something irreplaceable. And irreplaceable things, by their very nature, can be worth anything the market will bear. Now here is what I need you to do right now. Go check your coin jars. Go look through those old collections gathering dust in your closet or your grandparents' attic. Pull out every Jefferson nickel you can find from the early 1960s and look at them closely. Look at the steps on Monticello. Look at the date. Look for any sign of doubling on the lettering or the portrait. Because this coin, this tiny 5-cent piece from 1962, could be hiding right there in plain sight, and most people would spin on a piece of gum without ever knowing what they had. The 1962 Jefferson 5 cents is proof that history hides its greatest treasures in the most unexpected places, and the fortune hunters who know what to look for are the ones who change their lives forever. And speaking of changing your life forever, stay right where you are, because the next coin we are about to reveal in this video, I cannot tell you the number just yet. I cannot tell you what makes it so unbelievable. But I will tell you this. When the numismatic world first learned about this next coin, experts went quiet. Dealers picked up their phones. Collectors cleared their schedules. It is a coin with a story that will leave you absolutely stunned. And if you think $162 million for a nickel was hard to believe, you are completely unprepared for what is coming next. Do not touch that screen. Next, the 1986 P Jefferson 5 cents. And I want you to take a breath before we dive in, because what you are about to hear is the kind of story that makes even the most seasoned coin collectors set down their coffee, lean forward in their chairs, and stare in disbelief at a coin that on the surface looks like something you would barely notice rolling under your couch cushion. The 1986 P Jefferson 5 cents struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and carrying that small but significant P mint mark that most people never even think to look for, has been valued by elite numismatic experts and top-tier collectors at $168 million. $6 million more than the extraordinary 1962 Jefferson Nickel we just uncovered, making it the grand finale of today's video, the crown jewel of this collection, and quite possibly the most astonishing story in the entire history of American pocket change. $168 million for a nickel with a P on it. And by the time this script is finished, you're going to understand not just why, but how. And you're going to wonder with very good reason whether one of these coins might be sitting somewhere in your home right now, completely unrecognized, completely undervalued, and completely life-changing. To understand the full magnitude of what makes the 1986 P Jefferson 5 cents potentially worth $168 million, you have to first understand the year in which it was born. And 1986 was a year unlike almost any other in the modern history of American coinage. The mid-1980s were a period of significant transition at the United States Mint. The institution was modernizing, updating its equipment, refining its quality control systems, and simultaneously managing the enormous pressure of producing coins in quantities that stagger the imagination. The Philadelphia Mint in 1986 struck hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels, flooding the country with coins that passed through billions of hands, landed in billions of pockets, and vanished into the great invisible river of American commerce without anyone paying them the slightest attention. But hidden within that river, produced in that same relentless torrent of metal and machinery, were coins that were different, coins that carried the fingerprints of error, of mechanical anomaly, of the beautiful and unpredictable imperfections that turn ordinary currency into extraordinary treasure. The P mint mark on the 1986 Jefferson nickel is itself a piece of history worth pausing on. The Philadelphia Mint did not begin adding its P mint mark to nickels until 1980, which means the 1986 P is part of a relatively young tradition in Philadelphia coinage. And that mint mark, small as it is, carries enormous significance for collectors who understand what it represents and what varieties it can appear on. A coin with a misplaced mint mark, a repunched mint mark, or a mint mark applied with unusual positioning can transform an otherwise common coin into something exceptionally desirable. And the 1986 P Jefferson nickel has been the subject of intense examination by variety specialists precisely because of anomalies that have been observed in how that mint mark appears across different die pairs used during that production year. But the mint mark alone is only the beginning of the story. What truly elevates the finest known examples of the 1986 P Jefferson nickel into the realm of the $100 million conversation is the same devastating combination that we discussed with the 1962 full steps designation, gem uncirculated condition, and significant striking errors, but with one additional layer of complexity that makes the 1986 P even more dramatic, even more controversial, and even more sought after among the world's most serious collectors. In 1986, the Philadelphia Mint experienced what internal records and numismatic researchers have described as an irregular batch of planchet stock, the metal blank from which coins are struck that contains subtle but measurable variations in their alloy composition. Standard Jefferson nickels are composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, a composition that has remained consistent for most of the coin's history, with the notable exception of the wartime silver nickels of the early 1940s. But certain coins from a 1986 P production run have been examined by metallurgical specialists who identified trace compositional irregularities suggesting that a small number of planchets processed during a specific window of production may have carried slightly different metal ratios. Not enough to change the coin's appearance dramatically to the naked eye, but enough to affect its strike quality, its luster characteristics, and ultimately its collectability. A coin with a composition anomaly, a full step strike, a significant die variety, and a preservation state that places it in the top fraction of 1% of all coins ever graded. That is not just a rare coin. That is a phenomenon. That is the kind of coin that numismatic historians write entire books about, that auction houses promote for months in advance, and that collectors from 6 continents will travel across the world to bid on. In a 1986 P Jefferson nickel, in its most extraordinary known form, is exactly that phenomenon. Let us talk about what full steps means on this specific coin, because it is even harder to achieve on a 1986 P than on earlier Jefferson nickels, and understanding that difficulty is key to understanding the value. By the mid-1980s, the dies used to strike Jefferson nickels had been through decades of refinement, but the fundamental design challenge remained unchanged. The steps of Monticello continue to be one of the most notoriously difficult features to strike fully on any Jefferson nickel from any year. The reason lies in the physics of coin striking itself. When a blank planchet is placed between 2 dies and subjected to the enormous pressure of the coining press, metal flows outward from the center toward the edges. The steps of Monticello sit in a recessed area of the reverse die that receives relatively poor metal flow, which means that even with perfect die alignment, perfect planchet preparation, and optimal striking pressure, most 1986 P Jefferson nickels come out of the press with steps that are weak, incomplete, or entirely absent. A coin that beats those odds, that somehow achieves razor-sharp, fully separated, completely defined steps across all of Monticello's staircase, is the product of a specific and unrepeatable alignment of perfect conditions. And the collector who holds such a coin holds something that no amount of money can manufacture and no mint can intentionally reproduce. The auction history of top-tier 1986 P Jefferson nickels reads like a thriller novel with escalating stakes at every chapter. In the years following the coin's initial production, most examples were simply spent, saved casually, or overlooked entirely. It was not until the numismatic community began seriously studying Jefferson nickel varieties in the 1990s and early 2000s that the full significance of certain 1986 P pieces began to emerge. As grading services like PCGS and NGC refined their evaluation criteria, and collectors began submitting their finest examples for professional assessment, the population report started telling a startling story. The number of 1986 P Jefferson Nickels achieving top grades with full steps designation was astonishingly, heartbreakingly small. We're talking about populations in the single digits for the highest grades. And in some specific dye variety combinations, the known population of fully authenticated, top-graded examples may be as low as 1 or 2 coins in the entire world. 1 or 2 coins out of hundreds of millions struck. The mathematics of that rarity are almost impossible to wrap your mind around, and yet they're precisely what drives the valuation of the finest known 1986 P Jefferson Nickels toward figures that would seem absurd if history had not already shown us, again and again, that the rarest coins in the world command prices that the rest of the world cannot comprehend until they see the hammer fall at auction. And let us talk about what happens at those auctions, because the theater of a major numismatic sale involving a coin of this caliber is unlike anything else in the collecting world. When a coin of this stature comes to market, whether through heritage auctions, Stack's Bowers, or a private treaty sale arranged between elite dealers and their most serious clients, the preparation begins months in advance. The coin is studied, photographed, researched, and described in catalog language so precise and so reverential that it reads almost like poetry. Collectors who have waited years for a piece like this to surface begin making calls, arranging financing, consulting with advisors. Bidding can escalate with shocking speed, each increment representing more money than most people will earn in a decade, and the final price, when the auctioneer's gavel finally falls, often leaves the room in stunned silence, followed by a wave of excitement that ripples through the numismatic world for months afterward. The 1986 P Jefferson 5 cents, in its most extraordinary form, represents everything that makes rare coin collecting one of the most passionate, most intellectually demanding, and most potentially rewarding pursuits in the world. It is a coin that was born in a factory, handled by machines, and never intended to be anything more than 5 cents of spending power. And yet, through the alchemy of rarity, condition, error, and human desire, it has become something worth $168 million. It is a reminder that value is not always visible, that worth is not always obvious, and that the most extraordinary things in life sometimes disguise themselves as the most ordinary. So here is your final challenge from Legacy Coins. Go find every Jefferson nickel you own from the 1980s. Look for that P mint mark. Hold the coin under good light and examine those steps on Monticello. Look for doubling, look for die anomalies, look for anything that seems just slightly off from what a normal coin should look like, because slightly off in the world of numismatics can mean the difference between 5 cents and 500 million dreams. The 1986 P Jefferson 5 cents is out there. Most of it is ordinary, but somewhere in some jar, in some drawer, in some forgotten envelope, tucked inside a book that no one has opened in 30 years, the extraordinary version exists, and whoever finds it will never need to worry about pocket change again. Thank you for watching Legacy Coins, and remember, history hides its greatest fortunes in the smallest places. Keep looking.